Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the HKUST Institute for Advanced Study. I'm Andy Cohen. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, and I'm delighted to be hosting this second in a series of lectures, Stories of Creativity, organized by Mr. Wallace Chan. At our last meeting, a few days ago, I gave a brief introduction to the Institute for Advanced Study and our interest in creativity, not just in science, technology, and the like, but including both the fine and performing arts. And I also gave a short biography of Mr. Chan. In the interests of time today, I don't intend to repeat myself, but let me just do mention a few salient facts about Mr. Chan's personal journey before turning the proceedings over to him. So Mr. Wallace Chan, Chen Shiying Xiansheng, is an internationally renowned artist, known especially for his exceptional work and innovations in the crafting of jewelry and sculpture. He became a gemstone carving apprentice at the age of 16, and in the 5 decades since then, his curiosity and creativity have led to many jewelry innovations, such as the Wallace cut and the Wallace Chan porcelain, along with the crafting of many important pieces of fine jewelry. His work has been exhibited in many of the world's most prominent art fairs, and his pieces are in the permanent collections of many museums, including the British Museum and the Capital Museum of China. Today, we continue our stories of creativity with an introduction by Wallace, followed by a presentation along with some question and answers with Mr. James Putnam, an independent curator. So for today, please join me in warmly welcoming Wallace to begin this afternoon's program.
Welcome everyone to the second lecture in the Stories of Creativity series. Today's topic is artistry and creativity. To be honest, when I create, I just create. I dive into the process, which is always hands-on. I try and failed, and tried again, and maybe failed again. But it is not my habit to stop and define what I do. As an artist, I feel strongly that artistry and creativity go hand in hand and overlap. I believe it's also safe to say that one can be creative without being an artist. But an artist is most likely creative. The process of making art, the creative process, is much about problem solving. It is much about challenges and overcoming them. At least that's how it has been in my experience. As mentioned in the last lecture, I do not have a crystal ball to predict the future, but what I forgot to mention was that, in fact, I have 9 crystal balls. In 1999, I was asked by my biggest collector to create a great stupor to house a sacred relic, a tooth from Buddha in Foshan, Taiwan. I thought of the great stupor as the embodiment of the sacred being of Buddha, which is symbolized by the tooth of Buddha. So how could I convey the idea of an unearthly spiritual body with earthly physical materials? This is my idea. At that time, I was only a carver. I have no knowledge of metallurgy, gem setting, or phases. And I did not know much about gemology. So I took my idea and visited experts in Japan, Germany, and Switzerland, whom I thought could help bring my vision to life. They all gave me the same reply, that it was an impossible quest. And that was when I learned that you can always trust the experts. because while I may not have known as much as they knew about gemstones, and I certainly didn't have their education, I had something more important, something more valuable than any science or craft. I have the faith that anything is possible. When you can see the visible in the invisible, that is when the true magic occurs. It is the possibilities and the unknown that inspired and motivate me the most. I began that task thinking that I had all the time in the world. But I soon find out that my friend and curator who gave me the task was dying of cancer. Suddenly, it became a matter of life and death. All I want, day and night, was to finish the great stupor as far as I could, so that he could see his last wish come true. I did not dare sleep or rest. When I had to, I slept on my workbench for 3 or 4 hours and woke up to work again on the same bench. Every day, I was driven by the fear that my mentor would not live to see the project completely. On one hand, I was trying to create while acquiring knowledge from 7 different professional fields. On the other hand, I was chasing time, hours, minutes, seconds. As you can see from the design here, the main part of the body is a crystal ball. As simple as it looks now, it was among the greatest difficulty I encountered during the process. 9 crystal balls were broken before this one was completed. It was not easy to find a completely clean crystal ball this large, let alone find 10 of them. Every time I tried to drill into the crystal ball, it cracked. 9 times I tried, and 9 times I got the same result, like a cat that had used up its 9 lives. I had to make it or break it at that point. I do not know what enlightened me, but I decided to heat the crystal ball in an oven. It worked. Often it is the thing we cannot see that are the most powerful. And often it is the things we cannot see that matter most. In my 9 failed attempts, I failed to see what I could not see. And then I saw it. I heard it. I felt it. Nature has its order. Each type of stone is structured in a certain way. When I tried to drill into the crystal ball, it disturbed the crystal structure and thought invisible. It sent a certain level at stress or some kind of frequency. I would rather call it frying inside the stone, which cracked the crystal ball. By hitting it in an oven, I altered its structure and relieved the stress. I had no idea this would be the result. It was just a feeling. Since then, I have learned to always look for the invisible. One interesting fact in that, when I first thought of using a crystal ball, I was thinking that I wanted to use a transparent material to make Buddha's wisdom visible. By then, I knew it took repeated practice to make that wisdom visible. At last, I completed the project. Soon after that, my mentor passed away, and I felt lost. It may sound like we all know that death is a natural part of life. But the impact a true mental can have on your subconscious is beyond imagination. You never truly know until it hits you. I felt as if I had come face to face with death myself, because his friendship was so dear to me that when he passed away, an important part of me died with him. It was at that point, eager to seek the truth about life and death, I became a monk. After spending 6 months as a monk, I returned to the earthly world only to find that everything had changed. When I had decided to become a monk, I gave away all my possessions and burned all my photos. People thought I had gone crazy, so they left me alone. I returned to find that I no longer had the connections and resources I once had, but I still wanted to create. One day, I saw a block of concrete that had been abandoned on the street, so I carried it all the way home and made a carving out of it. I knew then that my purpose of life was simply to create. Not long after that, a man came to me with 2 diamonds, over 20 carats each, and asked me to create a pair of earrings from them. As a carver, I didn't know how, but I tried anyway. The rings turned out to be too heavy. It was impossible for anyone to wear them because the weight was simply unbearable. Traditionally, precious metals like gold, silver, and platinum are used to make jewelry. The earrings made me realize that the norm had to change. I began looking for a metal that would allow me to set big stones without sacrificing the overall aesthetics of the jewelry pieces and the comfort of the wearer. One day, I read about a pacemaker in the newspaper. It was created with titanium, a metal that is hard, light, strong, bio-friendly, and colorful. Titanium is a space-age metal, embodying and reflecting the spirit of our time. I decided that it could be the bonds to support the flesh and blood of my jewelry. First, I approached a scientist, and as usual, they turned me away. But one day, I have a sore tooth and visited a dentist who shared with me the use of titanium in dentistry. Titanium is not easy to tame, though. Not at all. It is a very stubborn metal. When you bend it, it bounces back. When you heat it up to its melting point about 1,700 degrees Celsius, it stands square until you give it the slightest push. Then it falls apart, rewarding you with power everywhere. It took me 8 years to master titanium. The process wasn't easy. My relationship with my then girlfriend ended as I struggled to navigate my way through the stubbornness of titanium. Before I have the skills to smell and taste, I hammered and carved. I soon realized that it's a magical metal, as magical as love. You must not force it. You must surrender your power to it and let it guide you through your heart. Often we find truly great things or great people minimizing their own existence to support the glory of others. Titanium is one of those silent, unsung heroes, carrying weight with incredible strength. It is almost invisible. Titanium is also a multifaceted character. It may seem stubborn, but it is not afraid of change. I shaped it as thin as needle and as string, and as hard as it is. It was transformed into a state of existence as soft and flexible as a piece of silk. With titanium, impossibilities and make possible. It is now 20 years since I first started experimenting with titanium. In 2021, I had my very first large-scale titanium sculpture exhibition in Venice called Titans. Earlier this year, I returned to Venice with another exhibition called Totem. At Totem, I showed a 10-meter tall titanium sculpture unassembled. The scattered titanium parts were all part of the sculpture's body. And when visitors walked inside the space, they were like the blood circling inside the body. Whenever there are visitors, the sculpture comes alive. I continue to seek growth in titanium. My largest titanium sculpture today is 11 meters high. Be it the crystal ball or titanium, I began with the desire to create an idea, which revealed many problems and challenges, all of which I need to find ways to overcome. In the process of navigating through the unknown, something magical happens. I keep calling it magic because it keeps taking me to somewhere else, to another place and time beyond my reality. Is it artistry or is it creativity? I would be interested in hearing your thoughts. But now it's time to welcome on stage my dear friend and curator, James Putnam, who will share with us his idea on the topic. Let's give James a warm welcome.
Hello, James.
Hello, good afternoon.
So, welcome to everyone. This is Mr. James Putnam, who is an independent curator and writer. With a background in art history, Mr. Putnam initiates projects with a cross-disciplinary approach, working with visual and performing artists, designers, writers, and cultural studies specialists. In 1999, he founded the British Museum's Contemporary Arts and Cultures program, which relates to the philosophically rigorous role of museums to examine and re-examine history, art, and artifacts in the light of current cultural-related issues. He has organized many exhibitions at unusual venues which combine contemporary art with historic sites and artifacts, like the ongoing series of exhibitions he curates at the Freud Museum, London. In the last decade, he has regularly curated a host of projects both in Asia and Europe. As an author, James has published both on ancient and contemporary art, including Art and Artifact, the Museum as Medium, which offers an extensive survey of the relationship between the artist and museum, a subject on which he has also lectured extensively. We're very happy to have James with us today to speak on artistry and creativity. Please join me in once again welcoming James.
Well, thanks for that nice introduction. I'm going to discuss artistry and creativity in context to Wallace Chan's two recent exhibitions, Titans and Totem, that I've curated Titans, actually both in London at Canary Wharf and also in Venice. Totem is the current exhibition we have on in Venice at the Fondaco Marcello. They're quite different exhibitions, in fact. So anyway, I think before I go into that, I thought it was it's going to be useful or helpful to talk a little bit about artistry and creativity, because there's a little bit of a debate about their meaning. They are definitely different, whereas only some people have artistic talent. Every one of us has the ability to be creative, but obviously not every creative person is an artist. I believe a creative person uses their imagination to formulate ideas and to solve problems. I guess really to sort of innovate something new. And using their imagination to have new ideas about solving problems. An artistic person uses one of many physical processes to create physical, and I guess now even virtual works of art, because more and more artists are getting into NFTs and creating virtual artworks. Creativity goes across all areas of human existence, and creative thinking can be applied in business relationships, health and technology, but it's becoming rather overused, I feel. We have these words like creative finance and creative management. It's almost, the business world has kind of appropriated this word and is using it to make what they do sound more interesting. So although you can be creative without being artistic, you can't really be artistic without being creative. Artistry involves possessing a set of skills with the use of imagination in making art, and what we could describe as workmanship. I think actually the idea of creativity and artistry, it does differ with different cultures. For instance, somewhere like Japan, it means something quite different, and it's more linked into something traditional. Although artistry doesn't necessarily involve manual skills and talent, because throughout the history of art, it's been common practice for painters and sculptors to employ assistants. But I do believe that having a certain degree of skill and technique is advantageous, as it does give an artist a more intimate understanding of and control over the materials that they use. And this is particularly the case with sculpture. And I think what Henry Moore says about materiality and monumentality relate very well to Wallace Chan's practice. Now, Henry Moore, famous British sculptor, he did have a concept which he called truth to materials. And this concept of truth to materials involves a respect for the material as a thing in itself. The idea that the form of a work of art should be inseparably related to the material from which it is made. The inherent quality of the original material is respected and commemorated through the process of making it a way of expressing an enduring idea or an emotion. The artist shows an instinctive understanding of their materials and its aesthetic possibilities, similar to the sensitivity that a craftsman has for his materials. Now, Wallace Chan is sensitive to the character of the materials he works, and he believes that these innate materials, these metals, possess some metaphysical energy of a life force, although they're inanimate. So using skill and wisdom gained through working his sculptural materials, he's able to exploit their maximum visual and structural properties. For instance, these titanium sculpture that he's been making has taken at least 8 years of trial and error and experimentation. And this is an understanding of the intrinsic qualities of materiality. I guess it's a tension between the original raw materials and what it finally represents that enables the artist and spectator to get a particular aesthetic experience. So speaking in a metaphoric way, it's the tension between the unfinished or the rough and the finished or smooth. Now, I believe that artistry comes from keeping the two poles of that tension in a dynamic balance for the creation of a work of art. So I'm going to mention again about Henry Moore because he took a lot of inspiration from the British Museum, where incidentally I spent 20 years working as a curator of ancient Egyptian sculpture, and I guess that's why I feel, you know, a certain affinity with his work. Now, in his formative years in the 1920s, Henry Moore regularly went to the British Museum and made sketches and comments in his diary and notebook. And I think it's quite illuminating to read Moore's comment in his diary, as I feel it does relate well to Wallace Chan's practice. So this is Henry Moore speaking. When I first visited the British Museum's Egyptian Sculpture Gallery and saw the great arm and imagined what the whole figure was like, which had been part of, then I realized just how monumental, how enormous, how impressive a single piece of sculpture could be. Though it wasn't just the size that impressed me, size and monumentality is not always the same thing. What I found in the Egyptian pieces was a monumentality of vision. This is something that cannot be taught. Either artists have it or they don't. And part of the grandeur of Egyptian sculpture comes from its stillness, the timelessness of the sculpture's poses, which is very different from Greek sculpture, which represents physical movement. So this stillness quality, this monumentality, you can experience it when you look at Wallace Chan's sculpture. Now, among the many sculptures that Moore made that were influenced by the British Museum's collection were his famous bronze King and Queen. And this was inspired by an Egyptian pear statue, or a dyad as it's called. And to commemorate Moore's centenary in 1998, I exhibited them together at the British Museum. So juxtaposing the ancient and modern sculpture. And this led me to start the contemporary art program at the British Museum. I did an exhibition way back in 1994 called Time Machine. And you can see this wonderful sand work by the artist Andy Goldsworthy, which flowed through the Egyptian gallery of the British Museum. And actually back then in 1994 it was quite an innovative thing to do, really, because nowadays many museums have an interaction with contemporary artists, but back then it was a less known thing. So Wallace Chan's current exhibition, Totem, at the Venice Biennale, comprises his unassembled 10-metre sculpture made of titanium and iron. Now, it could be described as an immersive installation, although that's become rather a bit of a cliche word, but it does include ambient soundscape. It's music that has a sort of healing quality and has also dramatic lighting. Now, I found the underlying concept in this installation, or this exhibition of Wallace Chan's sculpture, is about fragmentation, and it alludes to the notion of a fallen colossus. And for me, the installation relates well to archaeology and those large fragments of ancient sculpture that were discovered by travellers in the 19th century and transported to all the European museums, like, you know, the British Museum or the Louvre or the museums in Berlin. Now, the central motif of Chan's sculptures from his Titans exhibition is a colossal head whose facial features are calm and peaceful, and they have an aura about them and an enigmatic expression that seems to reference Buddhist imagery. This particular sculpture refers to Wallace Chan's the Wallace cut, which is this unique gemstone carving technique that we mentioned earlier, where it can be viewable from multiple angles. His Buddha-like faces with their exaggerated ears and features that have their origins in the religious statues he saw in temples. And of course his early gemstone carvings, and they evoke both past and present, an ancient archetype or even an extraterrestrial. The sculptures feature smaller versions of this head, occasionally framed within a square configuration of the iron girders. This creates what is often referred to in art as the Drost effect. That's placing a copy of a smaller image within itself and thereby suggesting a recurring sequence, or a kind of endlessly recurring sequence. We called this his first Venice exhibition Titans, as titanium is named after these mighty, immortal, mythical beings, and they symbolize the metal's strength, lightness, and longevity, hence the immortality reference. There's a dialogue between the two materials, titanium's lightness and durability, which contrasts well with iron's weightiness and easy corrosion. The light and ethereal titanium versus the heavy earthbound iron. And it's this kind of duality, or this dialogue, which is one of the sort of underlying themes behind the whole exhibition. Titan has included a site-specific installation of a wall-based titanium reliefs, and their mirrored reflective surfaces gave an uncanny dreamlike spatial experience. This was an installation that the visitor could walk through and gain a really uncanny experience of endless space. Chan's sculpture, as I mentioned, does have this sense of monumentality that relates to his understanding of scale from working with jewellery and sculpture, and the interrelation between what we could call the microcosm and macrocosm. And I think it's his unique understanding of this, that even he could make a piece of jewellery have an element of monumentality. So, as we mentioned, it's not just about scale. So as Wallace Chan says, artistry and creativity go hand in hand and overlap. And it seems fitting that this February he installed his 5-metre sculpture in Cabot Square, Canary Wharf, alongside Henry Moore's draped, seated woman. Thank you very much, everybody.